Good evening, everybody. How we all doing? Hello, hello. I see we're graced by our usual crowd. And a couple of new names as well. Welcome to you. Yeah, toasty indeed. Ah yes, failed computer hardware. I know all about that this week. You'll be pleased to know that my new case arrived this morning, and the bulk of the computer parts should be here tomorrow. So hopefully by Wednesday's stream, I should be up and running on a brand new rig, which would be nice. Be interesting to see how much quicker that actually is. I think this is an i7-8700K with a 2080 Ti and only 32 gig of RAM. So my new one is, I've actually got AMD for the first time since like the 90s. I managed to get a Ryzen 9950X. Everyone said to wait for the X3D, but I haven't really got time to wait, so I just went for the 9950X with 192 gigs of RAM. So hopefully that'll be quick enough. Thank you, Delta. I bought her some sweets in Tesco's last night, so she's definitely being well treated. So to begin with, I've just got a 4TB NVMe drive, which is a PCI Express 5 drive. It's the Corsair T700, if I recall, which is a decent drive. And I've read lots about using PCIe 5 M2 drive takes bandwidth away from the GPU, but apparently it's negligible. So hopefully that'll be fine. The motherboard's actually got 5 M2 slots on it, so I won't need an actual hard drive. It probably cannot play Crysis on max graphics. And oh, of course, yeah, GPU. I got a 4090. Probably just about scrape Doom. Thank you, BC5. Yes, pillows will be coming at some point, for sure. Case-wise, I actually went with the Thermaltake Core P3. I love it because it's wall mountable. Like with the test rigs that I'm going to build, which will be a 1050 Ti, a similar spec AMD card, and some various other bits and pieces. I'm actually going to have a rack, and I'll have rack cases for those. But I think for the main PC, because it's got RGB all over it, it'll be nice to display it on the wall. So I've got a wall mountable case. I've always been a fan of wall mounting computer hardware, so I'll have that above my monitors. There'll be lots of pictures to come. Anasi, does the planet targeting work now? No, not yet. For the simple reason is that I've had a bit of an overhaul of the sensor data structure, which is what you're looking at here. The issue we've been running into is that every time we add an additional layer of functionality, we're creating an additional layer of variables. And as you can see, the number of variables is just growing and growing and growing. And the impact of that on the actual widget blueprint is also growing and growing and growing. So you ended up with what is a massive event graph, just full of stuff which needs condensing down. The button handling is as simple as this. So all we're doing is we're passing the button press through to the parent blueprint, replicating it, and then just handling the outcome of that button press within the parent blueprint. But we've kind of crept into this situation where we're doing more and more logic on the widget blueprint, and I've been trying really hard to just not do that. Just don't do any logic on the widget at all, and literally just do output. So input and output, but no actual logic, and try and have all of that happening on the parent blueprint. So to facilitate that, I have created a structure where we can basically track the state of every aspect of the sensor's UI. And this is incomplete. It still needs some more bits and pieces added to it. But rather than having all of these variables as just separate variables, if we contain them all within a structure, then what we can do is we can work with that instead. So like here, for example, in fact, if I go through and we do the full chain of events. So we press a button on the UI, and you can see here that we're sending through the button ID mode GPS. That comes into here. So this is the event that we called. There's the button ID. We pass that just through the player controller, which converts that to a server authoritative event. So that is local, straight from the widget, which does not replicate. This is now a server authoritative event from the player controller. Taking our button ID, we go into GPS mode. You can see that we're now doing a switch on our button ID. So in this case, we were looking at mode GPS. And you can see what we're doing is we're setting that within the sensor's data struct. I was hoping just setting the members would fire the rep notify, but it doesn't. So you then have to then set that with itself just to fire off the rep notify. And all that does is we tell the UI that something's just happened, and we pass through the entire data container. And then we broadcast that same data container out to the rest of the engine. So anyone that happens to be listening to that gets this sensors data update. So on the sensors UI, which is this, we store a copy of that, do a switch on whatever mode we happen to be on. So in this case, we press the GPS button, so we go through the galactic position pin. And then we perform whatever logic we need to perform. And in this case, and I'm going to do this slightly differently, but we're just comparing the live value versus the stored value. And if it's changed, we then do some logic. So by doing it this way, we're just passing around a single data structure rather than having separate variables for every single thing, which is like all this. All these variables here, all those can be deleted, and we'll just use this one replicated variable instead. It really condenses down the code structure and just makes it so much easier to work with. So when we add additional layers of functionality, all we're doing is just adding it to the struct. So that is what I have been busying myself with over the past couple of days. Oh, Firstus, thank you, that's amazing. So Firstus has very kindly offered to buy some Captain tier rewards for our next giveaway, which is going to be in a couple of days, actually, on the 1st of the month. So on the 1st of October, we will run another competition on the Discord server. And in addition to the keys, you'll also have access to Captain tier rewards. which is very cool. So thank you, Firstus, very much for that. Okay, so normally at this point I would do a poll to see what we're working on this evening, but we've got some pressing things that kind of need to be worked on, so I'm going to skip the poll this week, and we will crack straight on with finishing what I've started here, and making sure that all of this works just as smoothly as it did previously, and then we'll get the planetary targeting fixed while we're at it. So hopefully this new data structure is just going to make everything so much easier. Yep, Ian, it certainly will be. Sadly, I've only got 1080p monitors, so we can't stream any higher than 1080p. No, definitely not Kelvin pods. In fact, none of the crew escape infrastructure is going to be space coffins. They're going to be proper lifeboats, like you have with a real naval vessel. It's a proper lifeboat with provisions that can support a dozen or more crew members. The idea with those is that on the underside of the hull, we'll have 4 or maybe 6 of these lifeboats, and the access to those will be all over E-deck. So you'll just need to nip down some stairs and you'll have a ring where you can access all the lifeboats. Right, so something I wanted to do is just see how much I broke. So you can see the holo display is definitely not happy with that change, because the holo display has also been using the old data format, and where we were using integers previously to switch between different states, I've changed those to enums instead, so we've actually got some more easily readable data there. The construction of the dev shed begins on the 7th of October, so just a week from now. There's a couple of selects here which are going to need replacing with the new format. Quite a few, in fact. Yeah, performance-wise, it's going to be more efficient because we're only passing around a single variable rather than several dozen replicated variables. If we look on here, scroll up, you can see we've got all of these replicated variables, loads and loads and loads and loads of them. So of course, every time one of these updates, it's doing a replication call across the network. We've literally condensed all of this into one single struct variable. Now, in terms of the data size, it's probably going to be similar because we're just merging all of those variables into a single struct. But we're having to do it less often, which is helpful. And also, where we're updating some of these, we're updating them in parallel. So when that triggers a refresh of the UI, you could have 3 or 4 different variables all triggering a UI refresh, which means within that given second, you could have the UI refreshing 4 or 5 times in rapid succession. Whereas doing it with the struct instead, what we can do is we can actually check to see if any of the pertinent variables that affect the UI display have been updated. And if they have, then refresh the UI. So we're only sending a single UI refresh rather than multiple. Yes, Paul. So the idea with the planetary landings is that you'll physically fly a shuttle down to a certain altitude above the planet. For an atmospheric world, that's pretty much going to be where the edge of the atmosphere is. So using Earth as the example, that's going to be 100 kilometers. So when you're 100 kilometers above the surface, then you'll have that brief transition. Either we'll have clouds obscuring the view, or just have a quick scene of the shuttle flying down. However we do that, there'll be a transition, and then you'll be above the surface, probably like 30,000 feet up or something. More sensors today. We're skipping the poll on this stream because we've got some pressing things that need to get finished. Yeah, I think 100 kilometers generally is a decent altitude, because you're virtually hitting the atmosphere at that point, and you're probably seeing the terrain get quite blurry, especially as if we're doing a tessellated texture for the space view of the planet, and then proper 3D terrain for the surface. We need to be able to do that transition before that tessellated terrain gets too messy. Essentially, I want to make it as real-time as it possibly can be. We can't do a full real-time landing because of the way we're moving space around the ship, and we can't chuck planets around that are covered in trees and rocks and things. So the planet has to be static and the ship has to be static, which means we do need that brief transition where we transfer the player between those two static environments. But having it so that the transition happens at a certain altitude and then you reappear relatively close to that altitude, we get to hide the transition, or at least minimize the transition as much as possible. Yes, Anasi. And one of the things that I need to add to this, and the reason I actually started this to begin with, is that when we're targeting different layers of things on the sensors, so take the long range sensors, we target essentially the 1 light year cube that contains either a star system or something else. And when we click the view detail to bring up the list of planets, we're targeting a different data object at that point. So I want to be able to track that on here, so that when you click send to helm, for example, it's going to send the whole thing to the helm. So it's not just going to send like just the vector coordinates of the location. It's going to send the whole data packet, which means the helm then has access to everything that's on here, programming wise, so that we can pull out things like the name of the location and any other useful information that we could use for the helm. Things like the orbital characteristics of the body that you're targeting is the kind of thing that will also be transferred along with this. So that allows for something which I was discussing on Discord actually. We can drop the ship on the outskirts of the star system if you haven't targeted anything. Right now, the default is that it will just fly you right up to the star if you haven't targeted anything specific within the system. So I want to change that behavior so that if you haven't targeted something, the location the autopilot will take you to would be essentially the Kuiper Belt. So it's just outside the orbit of the outermost planet, so that you're sat on the very edge of the system, ready to perform your scans before entering the system proper. Obviously, if you want to go somewhere specifically, you can just click View Details and target an object within that system and go straight there. But the untargeted default, I'd like to be the outskirts of the system. And by passing this entire data structure through to the helm, it means we have access to the data as to where that is. So the helm, and by extension the autopilot, will know where the outermost planet is, and it will know where to stop. Oh, that's good. I wasn't trying to be a mind reader, but I'm glad I did it. Yeah, that's another reason why I converted all of these integers to enums, because like if our display focus is 0, 1, 2 or 3, like at a glance you have to try and remember, alright, which integer was I using for which option. Having them as an enum, it means it says it in English, so I don't have to think about it. There won't be a speed limit in the system as such, but the ship will be slower within the system because of the gravity well. So every star will have a certain range where it affects the FTL drive, and the closer you get to the star, the slower that will be. So really, really big hot stars are going to have quite a large area of effect for the FTL drive. And the reason we're doing that is because 300 light years per hour is a ridiculously fast speed if you're within a star system. I mean, you can cross from one side of the system in like half a second, which is way too fast for gameplay reasons. So we really want to slow the ship down within the system, and having the gravity well affect the FTL is kind of the best explanation for that. Yeah, and black holes is a good point. So the danger factor with the black hole is going to be that, if I rewind that a second, so the way the FTL works is it multiplies the base sublight speed of the ship. So if your top speed is, say, 10 kilometers per second, then that 10 kilometers per second is multiplied by whatever the field strength is of the FTL. So that could be several million times multiplication in order to achieve 300 light years per hour. So the way I want it to work with the black holes is that when you'll reach a certain point close to the event horizon where the gravity of the black hole reduces the field strength of the FTL to 0, which means at that point the only source of propulsion you have is the sublight engines, and the FTL is doing nothing. And then the further you get away from the black hole, the less the gravity is affecting the FTL, and then that multiplier on the base speed goes up and up and up the further you get away. Yeah, exactly. So the fastest point from A to B, from one side of a sector to another, might not necessarily be a straight line, because if you've got something like, let's say, an open cluster with loads of B and O class stars, the area of effect from those O class stars could be so big that it's actually faster to fly around the open cluster than it would be to fly straight through it. but we'll have to see how that feels during playtesting. And we'll also need some kind of UI elements, or at least some kind of overlay on the bridge windows that actually shows those spheres physically, so that you can pilot your way around them. Yeah, it'll be a bit like that scene from the original J.J. Abrams Star Trek, where you've got the Enterprise at the end kind of on full warp by the singularity and going nowhere. That's essentially what we want to achieve with the black holes. So you could have the reactor at 110%, you could have the field strength at 100%, and yet that black hole is still pulling you backwards. Yeah, exactly, Jamo. And with the mass of the star being the thing that's causing the speed limit, obviously M-class stars will have a tiny impact, whereas an O-class star will have an impact probably multiple light years wide. Well, what I like about it is that it gives you an advantage for not using the autopilot. So if we have it so that the autopilot just plows through in a straight line wherever you're going, you're going to not get there as quickly as if you'd flown manually, which means there's a benefit for having a manual pilot who can, manually fly around the gravity wells, which gives the pilot something to do, and again gives you that human benefit over using the autopilot, which is what people have been asking for. People have been asking to have some way of being a good pilot and having that be meaningful, as opposed to just setting the autopilot and twiddling your thumbs. Yeah, except in this case we want to dumb it down, so we want the autopilot to be the less intelligent version. Although it won't say autopilot as such, it'll say like heading hold, speed hold, that sort of thing. So more like a real plane. So it's not an autopilot that you just turn on or off. You can choose what you want the computer to control. So you could hold a heading but control the speed yourself, that sort of thing. Yeah, we won't have it so that the autopilot puts the ship in danger. We'll just have it drop out of warp. If it's going to accidentally ram into a planet or something, it will just drop to sublight and alert the pilot to do something about it. Right, so I need to remember these were connected to. So GPS focal points, that would be that one. Yeah, that's part of the issue. It's like with like redundancy and backups aboard the ship. There comes a point where you make the hardware too redundant, to the point where it's not failing enough to be interesting. So there's definitely a balance between, realistically, how would it function in the real world, versus how do we need it to function to be engaging within the game world? If the autopilot is too good, then that takes away any benefit of having a human pilot. So realistically, even today, take SpaceX's Dragon capsule, it will ferry passengers to the ISS and dock completely autonomously. The crew doesn't need to press any buttons, they're just there as a backup in case something goes wrong. So even in 2024 we have that level of technology. So in 200 years time, autopilot is going to be orders of magnitude better than a human being. But this is a game, so we have to game it. In fact, you could probably say realistically, in 200 years time, there probably wouldn't even be people on the ship. So my challenge here, and again the reason why we don't use integers for this sort of thing, is I can't remember which way round the 0 and the 1 were. So which one was ship position, 0 or 1? We can probably work this out logically. So if our display focal point is the ship, then it's the ship that we want to be showing. Therefore, that is correct. Okay. And then conversely, we want that the other way around if it's the manual location we're showing. I think rather than running pins everywhere, I shall just stick this one on as it is. Focal point. So do a select on that. Stick that in there. Steal them. And then we can get rid of that. Yeah, making every role aboard the ship interesting is one of the biggest challenges, for sure. You just need to make sure that they've all got something unique to do. Although I think in some parts it's going to be more what your personal interests are. Like, we've got lots of people who are in the medical profession in the real world, and they want to do medical tasks within the game. So because the medical profession is their thing, they're naturally leaning towards those roles aboard the ship. Whereas someone like me, I'm I naturally prefer the engineering roles. So I'd much rather be working down in engineering, tinkering with the hardware, than just sitting around on the bridge barking orders at people. Each to their own and all that. This is nice and messy, so X, X, X. Okay, I. I think the command role is going to be good for someone who, I guess, just wants to explore the galaxy on their own. Especially on the smaller ships, I think. For something as big as the Magellan, it can be a bit of a daunting task. But once we start implementing some 5 or 10 man vessels, then you're going to have an experience that's probably more similar to the likes of Elite or Star Citizen, where you've got a small, intimate vessel with just a couple of crew members. And in that instance, you can just sit in the captain's chair and explore the galaxy essentially solo, using the NPC crew, as a resource. Yeah, Passenger's going to be a really, really interesting one, because once we start having the NPC crew needing to do absolutely everything aboard the ship, that's going to highlight any issues with the system for sure. Yeah, there's going to be 2 ways where, as a captain, you interact with the ship. So the holo display is eventually going to be touchable. So you'll be able to walk up to the display, click on a planet or a star, And then you'll have a little menu that pops up where you can select, scan this location, target this location, that sort of thing. Set a course to this star. Choosing those options will trigger actions on the NPCs that are sat in the relevant chairs. You can also look directly at those NPCs and then bring up a similar radial menu where you can issue a command directly to that NPC. So there are two ways of doing it. I'm trying to make it so that the holo display is like the captain's tool. It's how the captain interacts with the ship and issues commands. And the idea of being able to bring up a holo version of any of the bridge stations means that all the captain has to do is say, bring up engineering, and then point at the reactor on engineering and bring up, like, shut down the reactor or something like that, increase power. Or they could look over at the engineer NPC and issue similar commands. We'll be exploring that in terms of the sensors and the helm in the next major update. So once all this sensors work is done and this update's in the wild, then that's what we're doing next. We're doing a sensors NPC, a helm NPC, and the ability to issue commands, both by the holo display and by looking at them. People have been asking for the ability to command the ship without having to jump from chair to chair. So I think it's a good time to get that implemented. Again, with this, I'm just not convinced I've got the 0 and the 1 the right way around here. But we'll find out when I run it. Yeah, if everything's the wrong way round, then that was the issue. Sure, I've got these plugged into the right ones. Should be fine. No, I've not actually looked at the hologram fish, actually. I've been so busy doing all this UI stuff, I haven't had a chance. Firstus, yeah, the way we're going to handle the engineering side of things is we're going to have essentially states. So they're going to be saved states. So how's best to describe this? So let's say condition normal, so the normal operating state of the ship. The state of every single valve and switch and breaker is going to have a default value within this state file. So if any of those breakers or anything are different from the default value as specified in that state, then that will create a task for the NPC to go and revert it back to the state it should be in. Similarly, if you set the engineering condition to like cold and dark, then the NPCs will work to that plan and make sure that all of the breakers and switches match what state they should be in according to that cold and dark condition that's been set, if that makes sense. Yep, there's definitely a temporal element to that and doing things in the right order. We'll have to bake that logic into the process. So it could be that certain things have prerequisite values, so they won't move on until those prerequisites have been satisfied. Yeah, there will be maintenance activities, so everything is going to take wear and tear. So all components ship-wide will be ticking down over time with their condition. So just having the ship sat there ticking over and idling, things are going to be slowly losing health. Very slowly, not in an annoying way. So tasks will be generated, so the things that have ticked down the most will be generated as tasks for the NPCs to go and deal with. So if there's nothing pressing that needs doing, then the NPCs will just be doing preventative maintenance and just topping up the health values of things which are just naturally taking wear and tear. Yeah, medbay's at the front of the ship in sort of the city centre area. Yeah, if you think of the front of the ship as being essentially a town centre, so all of the things you'd expect to find in a town centre will be in the nose of the ship. So that's all of the crew entertainment, the crew facilities, things like medbay, and it's all sort of surrounding a mall-like corridor. So a big wide area with balconies and ceiling lights and windows and that sort of thing. Yeah, medbay's got 2 access points, so the front doors are going to be opening out onto the mall area, and non-emergency patients will just go in through the front. To the rear of medbay, there's going to be a side corridor which links up directly with the main kind of what I'm jokingly calling the ring road around the ship. So the edge of the circular section is a lot wider than all the other corridors, to the point where it's going to have seating down the middle of it. That's kind of like the main ring road that goes around the ship. So coming off of that ring road are all the corridors to all of the major areas of the ship. So if someone requires emergency transport down to the medbay, then they're never far from the ring road, and medbay connects directly to that ring road. So transporting people should be relatively efficient. I need to stop calling it a ring road. Do they have ring roads in the US? Is that just a British thing? So in the UK, sort of major towns and cities generally have a meandering circular dual carriageway around the town or city, so traffic can, I guess, orbit the city. And they're usually full of roundabouts as well. Broadway, that's a good description for it. Yeah, ring roads do sound like a sort of a quintessentially British thing. It's a big circular road, multiple carriageways, around a town, and filled with roundabouts and traffic lights. Yeah, and bypasses, although bypasses don't tend to be circular, they tend to be more banana-shaped. Good evening, Archer, welcome to the stream. Let's see what else is broken. Oh, nothing, that's good. That's a pleasant surprise. Right, so all of the buttons work. Can we zoom in and out? Yes, we can, so that's good. Right, so if we move this somewhere, okay, so they don't work yet, that needs fixing. Yeah, I was driving through, not Cardiff, the town next to Cardiff. I don't remember what it's called. Swansea. Yeah, I was driving through Swansea a couple of days back, and my god, the roundabouts. It's just roundabout after traffic lights. It took like an hour to drive through it. It was a nightmare. And Milton Keynes is awful for traffic. I don't think I've ever been through Swindon. I might have been. One of my first jobs was actually driving all over the UK, repairing computers in opticians. So I've probably been to Swindon before, in my youth. It sounds like the Portuguese version of Milton Keynes. So those buttons need hooking up. Those ones are okay. It's working, although these should be over there, so that just needs switching around. Yep, key bindings will be in the next update, along with full controller support. It's finally happening, Robber. Finally happening. NPC dialogue will be procedural, with a view to eventually having it use a large language model when one is small enough to run within the engine. So we've discussed this a few times when it comes to AI. We don't want to use any kind of external AI, so nothing like OpenAI or anything like that. If we power the NPC dialogue with an LLM, then we need it to be small enough that it runs within the engine. It needs to be trained on our own data, so it only really knows about the game and the game lore and the contents of the game. And we need it to be lightweight enough that it's not going to murder the GPU every time an NPC speaks. So, yeah, I don't think there is a model that exists yet. I think there's like a 1 gig llama model out there which might be lightweight enough, but that's the line in the sand. Ultimately, it doesn't need to be an advanced model. It doesn't need to do maths or anything. It just needs to be able to hold a conversation. So like a 1 billion parameter model would probably be way more than enough. I guess my dream would be to have the NPCs just naturally talking about what they can see out of the window. Obviously, we'll feed the data to them so they know what's outside the window. But having them just casually chatting about a planet that you happen to be orbiting and pointing out one of the continents and having a conversation about it, I think that would be like crazy immersive. Yeah, well, interpersonal relationships are relatively simple to achieve. That's just a stat that you track the value of. Hey, it could happen, you never know. Yeah, the NPC crew will have 3 shifts per in-game day, and the length of the day will be something you'll be able to define with the game settings. I'll probably have it anything from half an hour up to a full 24 hours. So within that period, there will be 3 shift changes. The player, however, will not be forced out of their role on a shift change. So that's just going to be for the NPC crew. And that only applies for the sandbox and multiplayer. On the single player campaign, it's going to work very differently, and there will be a story and narrative driven experience where you have to go to bed at the end of the day, and waking up in your quarters starts a new day and a new adventure. It's going to work very, very differently in the single player campaign. But in terms of the sandbox and multiplayer, only the NPC crew actually adhere to the shift pattern. You can choose to adhere to it, of course, if you're a player, but you won't be forced to. Yeah, if you want to just stay on shift, then again, you're as a human player, you are not restricted in the same way that the NPCs are. Yeah, time skipping. So again, in the single player campaign, when you go to bed, that's essentially the end of that day. And then when you wake up, a new day begins and a new quest or whatever else is happening. In the sandbox, it's more complicated because, especially where you have multiple players and multiple shifts happening, so to be honest, we probably won't have sleep at all for players within the sandbox. Obviously, you can roleplay going to sleep, and you'll be able to lay in your bed and pretend. But from a mechanics perspective, I think we'll have it so that sleep is only really sleep in the single player campaign, because that's where it's relevant the most. Otherwise, you get into situations like in Minecraft or Content Warning, where all of the players have to go to bed at the same time in order to skip time, and there's no real value in skipping time. Yeah, potentially, yeah. Yeah, Steph, exactly. Yeah, bumping into other ships is a complicated one because obviously this is a session-based multiplayer. We're not running any servers in that regard. If our plans for the SQL database pan out, then a group of players can share a SQL database that they themselves host, and then that will track the location of all of their vessels. So if they wanted to roleplay a federation of sorts, then they could have potentially dozens, if not hundreds, of ships existing within their shared galaxy, and they'd be able to see each other's ships flying around. They wouldn't be able to interact with them in any way because it would literally just be a database passing a transform. So position, direction, speed, that sort of thing. They wouldn't be able to fire upon them or do anything like that with them. But it's a way of at least seeing the other ships within the game, like MMO light. Raphael, yeah, definitely. So anything like that would obviously be a toggle in the settings, because they are very, very heavy when they're doing their inference. So it would be, do you want procedural NPC conversations, or do you have enough spare bandwidth in the CPU or GPU that you can run an LLM locally? Yeah, we'll have to have a think about that, Dak. And I'd say at least initially, there will be no active sleeping within the sandbox or multiplayer. But that doesn't necessarily always have to be the case. Yeah, not so much a hosted MMO, more a shared data source. So things like, if you meet an alien race and your diplomacy with that race goes terribly, and that race is now outwardly hostile to you, then if you're part of a player group that are all sharing a SQL database, then that race will be hostile to them as well, because as far as they're concerned, they hate humans. So it's that sort of thing. So you're all feeding data into a shared data source and then reading back that same data. Right now I'm working on the sensor's new data structure. And that's an interesting idea, Molan, actually. I don't know, off the top of my head is the easy answer. We would probably have to have a server running on one of the other machines and be able to access that server over a LAN. Yeah, that would be quite unfortunate, Dak. Right, let's get some of these buttons lined up. Right, so that's all the data being set. We just need to make sure we're actioning it on this side. So the range was working fine. So that one's good. That one's good. What else have we got here? Not using that anymore. and done. So essentially what this is doing now is it's grouping all the code via sensor mode rather than via function, which is where it was before, which was why it was getting a bit unwieldy. So keep that one as is. So what we'll do is we'll just collapse all of this into a collapsed graph. So we can do the same with these as well. This is going to really clean up the graph. So we've basically taken all of that junk and just condensed it down to this. And this is the single update that gets passed through. So whatever action is performed, we're passing through a single data point, which we then act upon accordingly. Which means that all of this stuff can get deleted, leaving us just with this, which is nice and condensed. Probably condense some of these, but these are essentially just the button presses, so I might go ahead and leave them as is. So that can go as well. So when we set the value, we're actually reading the display directly and turning that into a vector. I think what we'll probably do is add that to the data structure as well. So all we do is we update the UI. We don't read from it, because we should already have that data stored. Probably a pass through from that. Yeah, essentially you can, things like with variables, you can delete unused variables, which is useful. And then like this, if anything has an endpoint that it can't get to, it will give you an error. It's basically saying, yeah, that doesn't exist. what that was doing was firing this. So to replace that with I think we'll do treat it as a button press because we need to go through the whole process. Yeah, like if I go to delete unused variables, you can see that already there's a whole load of variables which are no longer used because we're replacing that functionality with a single struct. But I will wait until we are completely done with it before I delete them all. So yeah, this is a good example of where we're doing logic on the widgets rather than doing the logic on the underlying blueprint, because this isn't replicating. So nothing that happens here would be visible to other players in the game, which is no good. That's not what we want. So if we turn this into sort of a fake key press, then essentially what we're doing is we are just replicating one of these buttons here, this one. So yeah, so we just fake fire this, and it goes through the whole the same process. To be honest, the logic for that needs improving anyway, because on host blueprint we're literally just passing through the key presses. Obviously the goal here is to make sure that all of these actions fully replicate in multiplayer. It's always an added layer of complexity. Don't know, GVR. Nothing's changed as far as I'm aware. The fish tank's on. I wonder if that's something to do with it. What if I stop slouching? Does that help? Pretty sure it's still set to cardioid. Hang on, I will just double check. Yep, still set to cardioid, so should be as it was. I'm just debating how best to do this. Do I store the button press and send it through with this data, or is that overkill? Because it's not really the same kind of data. So this is more the sensor's state, so a snapshot of the sensors as is. Whereas this is more of an active key press. So it's probably best to retain it like this. and then handle that accordingly on this end. So that comes through this, essentially. Actually, that gives me an idea. Right, because what we can do is we can do a switch on that, same as before. Yeah, it's never a good thing when I suddenly have a plan. Yeah, so if we do this, then what we can do is we can filter these through on a per mode basis. Just wondering whether I add an additional input on here, but that would just make it messy, so I think I'll keep it like this. Right, so that's just the numbers. Just clears the field. Deletes a character at a time. Right, we should be able to simplify this a little bit because we've got the data for that now. So if we grab our manual input field, let's see how well that works if we do it on a switch. So we don't need any of that. What we do need is we need these. So this button here. Those ones. So basically, if we're on X, we want to go to Y. If we're on Y, we need to go to Z. And if we're on Z, we go back to X. So when you press the next button there, it'll just cycle through all of the different modes. Because we're manually pressing these buttons, it should do all the animation stuff for us, because it's no different than if we press the button manually. Hey Tim, all good? Just working through some logic. Okay, so this is one of those examples where you could do with storing this data within that struct, because we're pulling it out into separate variables, which gets messy. Yeah, then we're bypassing the enter button on here. So we do have the vector for it, so and the reason I'm going to use the long range one is because the long range one and the GPS one are shared. Essentially, when you populate the long range coordinates on the GPS, we need that to carry through to the long range as well, so you're not having to type it in twice. Right, so that should be filtering through to this. Which I'm assuming is being fired by this, yeah. So that's basically redundant now. We don't need that anymore. Means all of this that. So we'll steal all of that and then we'll pop it all in here. Sure, yeah. So what I'm working on right now is a much more streamlined data structure for the sensors, because as we're adding more and more functionality, the sheer weight of variables is beginning a bit overwhelming. There's just so much data happening that the data structure is it's getting too verbose. So what I've done is I've condensed it all down to a simple structure, which is just a collection of variables, essentially. And we're replacing all of these different variables that keep getting created with just a single structure where we can pull out the values that we need. So like with this here, we can just do that, that, and that, which means we don't need that, we don't need that. And we shouldn't need that either. Where we might be referencing the manual coordinates on here, that should now be coming from this instead. So we've got manual galaxy coordinates, so we want to pull that out of there instead. Just one less variable cluttering up the place. I need to add this variable to the structure as well. So again, this becomes redundant basically because we're doing it with the main data push instead. So we press our button and then it happens up here. So again, we're basically getting rid of the logic that's there and just leaving the single button press because that's all that's needed on the UI. So let's just delete this stuff. again, we'll replace that functionality. So one of the things we have here, so we've got two macros, it's the same macro referenced twice, for redrawing the galaxy. Now what we want to do is make sure that only happens once. So we take it from here. So rather than running this check here, and indeed doing that, if we do that last, then we can do the update last as well, so we can skip it there as well. Right, so all we're doing is updating some UI. Nothing dramatic happening there. Same here, just updating the UI. And just updating the UI. So after we've gone through and changed our various UI's elements, we need to make a decision on whether or not we're going to redraw the galaxy display. And we don't want to do this unless something significant has changed. So within this struct, we basically need to run through a couple of comparisons just to see whether that data has changed enough to warrant redrawing the whole galaxy. Yeah, exactly that, CSI. It's one of those things where you've got to break eggs to make an omelette. The data structure as it was getting too messy. So by organizing that data and making it more efficient, you naturally fix bugs along the way, because you're taking what is essentially spaghetti mess and turning it into nice, polished, functional code. Right, so what variables are we accessing here? So we've got the ship name, we've got the galaxy coordinates, manual coordinates, range, focal point, and the display focus. Right, okay, so there's 4 main things there. Yeah, I've done the same thing many times. I've known that a change would improve the way things work, but I also know that the result of making that change is a lot of hard work. So you just put it off until it's just unavoidable. Absolutely. Enums are so much more expandable than just using an integer. I think what we'll do, actually, is we'll run a bunch of comparators into an OR, and then do that. So any of those have changed, then we will redraw our galaxy. And then we will quite simply, rather than doing each one individually, we should take our live sensors data and just set it there. So if any of those are true, we'll redraw the galaxy, otherwise we won't, but we will update our stored data regardless. Which means we need comparisons for. So we definitely need GPS range. We also need focal point, display focus, and a manual coordinate. I will tidy this up. Right, so if any of that reports true, then we redraw the galaxy. So let's just test that and make sure it does actually work. Yeah, fix these things. So that's one of those on reps that can go away. That anymore. That anymore. So these are all of those on rep variables which and indeed functions which can be deleted. So we can still zoom in and out. So it means that that Boolean check is working because it's recognizing that the display range has changed. Should recognize the focus change as well, which it does. Right, so that should be down there. Oh no, it's not. It's 0. No, that is correct. Ignore me. That's not moving, so that just needs fixing. Okay, those all still work. Something's not being set right there, but that's easily fixed. So those are the two of the bigger ones that will need to be replaced. Why on earth is it all the way over there? Right, bit neater. I'll add some comments and things once it's properly polished. I wonder why that's not firing. So on here, these borders should flash. Yep, they definitely work. Not so much reinitialize, but definitely fix, because where before we were using individually set variables, now we're using a structure. So it means every instance where there was a variable needs to be replaced with a structure instead. So it's just essentially sanity checking everything. But it's it's a task that's well worth doing, because like here we've already saved a few refreshes of the data, so because we're only checking this once now, it doesn't matter how many data points change at any given moment. It's only ever doing this once per data push, whereas before it was doing it multiple times. So it means that the galaxy data, the visual display of the galaxy, is only refreshing once per data push, which is obviously an improvement in performance. The same will need to be done for the long range as well. Yeah, and everything having access to the data is definitely the big benefit for this, because like I said, we can broadcast out this one structure, and the holo display can read it, the helm can read it, and the holo display will basically draw its content based on the contents of that structure. Yeah, this is one of those things that's frustrating, and I talk to Claire about this quite often, is that we can spend a lot of time doing under the hood improvements like this, and from within the game, all you see is that something's now broken. So it's like all that hard work that was done is completely not visible to the end user, and all they see is it looks worse than it did before because now you've broke stuff. But it's just one of those necessary evils sometimes. You just got to rip off the plaster, fix all the problems, and then you end up with a much smoother, more optimized system at the end of the day. Yeah, it's a lot more optimized. So these ones were actually drawing correctly, so I don't need to worry about those. This is all working fine. No need to change anything there. Right, so why aren't those animations playing? I suppose that's the next thing to answer. See whether or not we get that. Right, does it say hello? It does. Right, so why is it not playing the animation? Or is it firing all three of them? Because that would definitely cause that problem. That's interesting. So I have to press each one twice for it to register the fact that I've pressed it at all. So still says Z, now it says X. Still says X, now it says Y. Is that an out of the box problem, I wonder? Yeah, it could definitely be a layering issue. So let's go for Y. Oh, okay, so that is happening straight out of the gate. So what's going on there? Yeah, I'll follow the logic through and we'll see what's happening. Right, so we press the button. All of that code is now gone. So we fire through to here. Blah, blah, blah. Just wondering whether or not we're accidentally setting something here. So that's definitely long range. You're not set up yet, and you're definitely not doing anything. Let's get rid of some of this lingering code because that can't help. Right. Manual lock GPS X. Manual lock GPS X, that's that one. So we're definitely setting to GPS X. And then we are sending that data through to here, which goes to here, which means we go through here. We're on galactic position, so we go through to here. And then we take our manual input field here, which is that one. Take a reference of what our active input is. We need to know that, so any button presses go to the right place. We disable the ones that are not playing. Yeah. Logic looks sound. I mean, the default value shouldn't matter. Just change it to something completely different. It's nothing to do with the default, so it's definitely something else. Press that one, we replicate that, sure none of these have GPS in the name. Okay, GVR, have a good one. Hope you get enough sleep. Right, so this is literally the only place that this can go. Out of just pure interest, let's see what it's actually doing here. So this will fire every time anything updates this this variable. So that'll be interesting to see if it's being updated more than once. So we press it once. And it is firing twice. Actually, no, it's not. I've got two print screens. Oh, actually, that's interesting because it's the second value that comes up is the one that fired second because it goes bottom up in terms of its ordering. So it fired the results before it set the variable. Oh no, of course it would do, wouldn't it? It's because I've got it after this, so of course it's going to do that. Fascinating. So we are passing through the correct value, but then that value is changing halfway along the process. Hey Don, welcome to the stream. Right, so we know it's correct at this point. It then ceases to be correct at this point. Let's see if it's correct here or not. That one. I mean, that should have just... There's no reason why the data should change just because we're setting a variable. You never know. Weirder things have happened. So that tells us that this is correct. So at this point, don't want that one. So this is correct. So that's correct. This is correct. Which means, oh, I see the problem. Because we're using the stored version and not the live version. Are we doing that elsewhere as well? Oh, yes, we are. Suddenly, it makes sense. Those ones are supposed to be like that. That's better. So now when we press next, we should move on to the next one. Next. 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 Perfect. Great. So it's not setting the value on next, which does need to happen, but it's that working. Okay, that's working. That's working as well. Okay, so it's all working on the UI. Holo display is not putting the things in the right place, but that's just I think we've got our previous values transposed, so that's easily fixed. Right, so we need to fix that, not swapping the arrow over. Only a couple of days CSI. I didn't start doing this until a couple of days ago. So, yeah, not there for very long. Make sure the zoomy zoom still works. And make sure it still works in the right place over there. Yep. Still zooming on the right point. Great. All good. Right, so the next thing to update, let's make sure it's the right one. So we want display focus. So all of that gubbins needs to disappear from there. And get migrated over here. Oh, I see. Yes, we need... This is two separate things. So another example of where we're redrawing the galaxy more than once, so they can go away, because we're handling that just down here. Okay, Zelaf, have a good one. The wrong way round. So if we press Galactic Center, we want to turn off that one. Yeah, so it needs to be that way around. So to be perfectly honest, there's no point collapsing that node because not really much code, it can just go there like that. Same with this one, it's kind of an unnecessary amount of collapsing. Stick that in there. Oops, no, that wanted to be a switch. Okay, so that's working now. And that that should work now as well. Okay, so a general usability improvement that people have been asking for is that if we add a value in there a minute, is when you go to edit that value, people are asking for it to zero out that value, because right now you can just keep typing. So to save you having to like clear it, have it auto delete. So I think we'll go ahead and set that up as well. Actually, something we're missing is we're missing a none option on our input fields there. So we need to be able to just zero out this value. So that is going to be more pertinent here. So yeah, so if we press next or set, yeah, then that needs to be set to none. Yeah, I think we'll leave the clear option in there in case someone, I don't know, makes a typo or suddenly changes their mind. It's nice to be able to just press a button to clear it out. I'm still not completely happy with using this the way we're using it. I suppose for now we could take set our manual input field to none. That's true. That is a lot of lines to redraw. Yeah, so if we don't set this to none, then the keypad buttons will still be sending key presses to those fields, which is no good. We don't have any kind of cancel button or anything, so yeah, it's going to have to be set. That should do it. And then on this one, obviously we've got the none option on here as well now. So all we need to do with that, quite simply, is just turn off all the animations. That one, and that one. So yeah, none just kills those. Also need to clear that as well. Yes, Raphael, that's a good point. Not sure, CSI. Try asking the question in a different way. Not sure I understand. That's the string. So in Unreal Engine, purple denotes the string value, and that's literally just the button ID. So it's just plain text. So all we're doing is we're sending a plain text ID through, and we can switch on that. And then what I just did here is, so rather than stopping the animations when you leave, or go to a different menu. It's easier to do it when you arrive instead, so when we arrive at this page, we'll reset the animations. Although, actually no, we can't do that because all of this fires every time so if anything changes, all of this fires. So we have to do that elsewhere. That's fine. I'll put something together specifically to do that. Oh, I see, it's not looping the animation. No. Is that set to 10? Okay, so we definitely want to restore a state when it stops. Does that have to be -1 maybe? Yeah, it says 0 to loop indefinitely.